Wide receiver Greg Jennings has been taking shots at his former quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Here's what he told the Star Tribune just last week. He says, "Don't get me wrong, 12 is a great person, but when you hear all positives, all positives, all positives all the time, it's hard for you to sit down when one of your teammates says, man, come on, you've got to hold yourself accountable for this. It's hard for someone to see that now because all they've heard is I'm doing it the right way. I'm perfect. In actuality, we all have flaws." Well, his new coach, Leslie Frazier, has noticed the jabs, and he told ESPN.com he's not happy. That's not something that we're high on, and he and I are going to talk before we practice Saturday afternoon. That's not how we do things. He has strong feelings regarding his former team, and that's good, but there is a way to get that communicated. And we've got to sit down, and he and I have got to talk a little bit. Stephen A., you didn't get a chance to weigh in on this, on Jennings' comment, so I want to know what you think of what he's saying about that bad man.
Well, first of all, I don't like it.
Okay.
And I don't like it because I think it's completely unnecessary. And I think it comes across as sour grapes, and I think it comes across as being a bit small. And I know Greg Jennings to be better than that. He's a better football player than that. He's a better man than that. It's really unnecessary. He was hurt last year. He only played about 8 games, had about 366 yards, only about 36 receptions. He came on our show because he's a friend of this show, and he talked about Jordy Nelson and, you know, other guys on the squad and how there were other options, how you got some young brothers coming up. And obviously, he was playing for a new contract, would have liked to have had better numbers, would have liked to have been a more of a primary target. You can surmise a bunch of these things based on the stuff coming out of his mouth. I don't find it venomous. I don't find it vicious. But I find it bringing unnecessary, unwanted attention in the direction of Aaron Rodgers. You know, Mike McCarthy's the coach. Mr. Thompson is the executive for this franchise. You have other people to look at and point the finger to. Greg Jennings can't come on the show and acknowledge that this is a business, but then forget about the things that business entails. You know, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback for this franchise. He is a bad man. This bad year was 39 touchdowns, just 8 interceptions, and a 108 passer rating. And that's a down year for Aaron Rodgers. That's a bad man. And I say it, and I'll continue to say it to the high heavens. I think he's the best quarterback in football. Yes, better than Tom Brady. That's how I feel, Skip. That smile on your face. That's how I feel. But whether he is or isn't, it's like, Greg, you moved on to a new team. You got some money. You got a new contract. You got a new organization. And I was very, very happy and proud to hear Leslie Frazier stand up and say what he says, because those are the kind of things that can hurt Greg Jennings down the road. And why do you need that when you're the quality of an individual that Greg Jennings is? Why do you need to come across as petty when you have exhibited anything but thus far in your professional career just because of something like this? It's really unnecessary.
I completely and utterly agree with everything you just said.
But you don't care.
I don't care. I don't care. Leslie Frazier was not happy with this because Leslie Frazier clearly is the head coach of the Minnesota Vikings, where Greg Jennings now plays, and unfortunately for them, they, with Christian Ponder at quarterback, have to play that bad man that is Aaron Rodgers twice this year within that division. So that's why he wants Greg Jennings to please put a lid on this. I, for one, applauded Greg Jennings for having the guts and the courage to stand up, being the high-character young man that he is, and say what needed to be said by sending a little constructive criticism back to his ex-team, because nobody in that locker room is big enough to stand up and say what Greg Jennings was just able to say, which is why I loved it. Somebody told the truth about an Aaron Rodgers who has been so pampered, so put on a pedestal in Milwaukee, that he thinks he can do no wrong. He's, to use the word Greg used, he is not always accountable. He's never accountable when things go wrong. He deflects all the blame onto his teammates and never accepts any. And because of that, he's not the best teammate. He's not the best leader of that team. And ultimately, that team now has lost. Again, I don't count the Minnesota playoff game last year. I guess you got to give them a playoff win there. But 2 years in a row, they've lost to 2 really good teams. One got to the Super Bowl, one won the Super Bowl, but they lost their first-round game. And there is going to be a unity issue within that locker room, because now that Greg is gone as one of the premier leaders on that team, Aaron's going to have to rise even further into the leadership role. and this will help clear some air in the Green Bay locker room. I think Greg Jennings did them all a favor in Green Bay. Little parting gift from Greg Jennings.
First of all, let's qualify what we're saying from time to time, perhaps even modify your statements. Courage. How courageous is it for you to say what you said when you're in the other team's locker room now? How come you didn't say it when you were there, wearing a Green Bay Packers uniform in the same locker room?
This won't make you very popular in Packer Nation.
But the point is that, again, if you are a high-end producer or you have the capabilities and you speak out in terms of the issues of accountability, and it's not like he denigrated Aaron Rodgers. It's not like he sat there and crucified the dude. He simply said, you're flawed, you're not perfect, just like none of us are. And so my point is that don't give me courage. It doesn't take a lot of courage to leave town, skip town, wear another uniform, and then speak about the folks that you used to play with and for. Courage is when you're willing to say that while you're still in that locker room, when that dude can walk right a few feet away from you and say, look, man, what did you say here? What am I reading here? What is this about? Et cetera, et cetera. That's not courage to go into another locker room, so don't give me that. That's number one. Number two, this is the 5th-ranked offense in the NFL last year, the Green Bay Packers. Don't tell me that their troubles was because of their offense. Their trouble was because they had one of the most horrific defenses imaginable. A defense so bad that the only thing we know about it is Clay Matthews commercials. That's it. Everything else
is a lot.
Well, listen, the commercials, he got the commercials because he won a Super Bowl a couple of years earlier. The point that I'm trying to make to you is that their defense was horrendous. It was embarrassing. A matter of fact, the only reason why they lucked up in terms of flying under the radar occasionally is because New Orleans was just, they made you wonder whether or not a defense actually existed, in their city. So that's the only reason. Green Bay's defense was awful. So let's call it what it is. Their offense has not been their problem. It hasn't been their Achilles heel. It hasn't been a cause for them not achieving the level of success the bad man that he is, Aaron Rodgers, should have achieved. So let's just put all of these things in this proper context and get down to the nitty-gritty. It is not courageous for somebody to leave an employer and then talk smack about him. It's actually very weak. And I'm not saying Greg Jennings is weak, because he's not. He's a man, and he's a good person. But this came across as very small.
He burned his bridge to Packer Nation. I think that took some guts to do. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he was saying. He knew the ramifications. And via Twitter, Facebook, whatever, he will be under siege as we speak, because Packer Nation, I can attest to this, they are vocal.
But you know what?
vicious.
He started on our show when we were in L.A. A small little poke.
He did. It was a little poke.
And then he amped it up a bit.